From the KHON2 News, this is a special report.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us on this Saturday afternoon for this special report. At about 8 o'clock this morning, Hawaii emergency management officials mistakenly sent out a text alert that read, "Ballistic missile threat inbound to Hawaii, seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill." 38 minutes later, emergency officials confirmed there is no threat to Hawaii. Subsequently, Governor Ige Vern Miyagi, the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency administrator, and the U.S. Army held a joint press conference. They said it was a mistake made at the Emergency Management Agency, allowing this false alarm to be sent. Now, we're awaiting another press conference that will get underway in just a few minutes. But to further tell you what was said during that first press conference, Mr. Miyagi said it was regrettable that the false alarm went out. It will not happen again. He took full responsibility, although it was said that someone who was working there were 3 people there at a time, 3 people, 3 shifts, and at about the time of the shift change, it was inadvertently sent. It was a mistake. The cancellation notice would normally go out right away. There is a cancellation process. However, that did not happen, and Miyagi, at the time of the press conference, could not answer why it did not go out. Now, the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency is a coordinating agency between Hawaii's 4 county emergency management agencies. Now, it is a state warning point, and when there is an alert to be sent, it can connect also to more than 22,000 emergency managers around the country and to the National Weather Service. That said, this alert, this false alarm, did go out around Hawaii, but soon found out, whether they found out from the alert or not, around the world, the country. And we have been getting a lot of interest as well from other news outlets as to getting answers, which we hope to get at this press conference. Some of the remaining, and there are many, but some of the remaining questions are, why didn't the cancellation go out right away? What happened? Why did it take 38 minutes for the false alarm to be sent? There are other ways. There are counting nixles. There are police alerts. There are other ways to get the message out. Was there a problem with the technical part of the system that did not allow them to send out the cancellation? There were some sirens that went off. We were called by someone in Wahiawa who said that the siren did go off there. Many, of course, did not hear a siren. So what is the connection with the siren and with such an alert? What you're looking at right now is in Waikiki. Now, many visitors may not be signed up for this alert, but of course, many of the workers there, as you saw, someone on the beach, a lifeguard, did get alerts, and so they were letting the visitors know. And we spoke with some of the visitors and the locals in Waikiki this morning. We'd like to hear their reaction.
You think it's a drill, you don't think it's not a drill, so there was a bit of panic in the hotel. A lot of people running out. We're at the Outrigger Waikiki. A lot of people dashed out of the restaurant into the street. There was a few people upset.
People are in a panic. They're running out of the hotel, and people are being told to stay in the hotel. It's the safest place in the hotel.
A little bit of a panic. Everybody was chilling at first, and then next thing you know, just everybody's phones went off one time, and there was a chaos. Stories booked it. They left the beach. My workers left me. He was shaking his hand like, oh. They're so scared.
Oh, there was no one on the streets after like a couple minutes. Everyone like left. They all ran into the buildings and stuff. Oh, thank God. You're calling all your parents, telling them you love them. Oh my God.
I saw a few tears out here this morning, but for the most part, people look more just like dazed, kind of wondering around what to do.
And again, reaction this morning when that alert went out. Again, of course, it was a false alarm. We have a press conference getting underway right now with Governor Ige.
Never forget. A day when many in our community thought that our worst nightmares might actually be happening. A day when many frantically tried to think about the things that they would do if a ballistic missile launch would happen. You know, I know firsthand that what happened today was totally unacceptable, and many in our community was deeply affected by this, and I'm sorry for that pain and confusion that anyone might have experienced. You know, I'm too very angry and disappointed that this happened. We're doing everything that we can immediately to ensure that it never happens again. You know, we have spent the morning with General Logan, Vern Miyagi, and those involved with emergency management and their teams, and I've directed them to make the changes necessary to ensure that a false alarm will not happen. We are working to evaluate everything in the sequence of today's activities to make sure that we are prepared and the procedures are changed so that a single person will not be able to make an error that triggers another false alarm. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Vern Miyagi to go through today's events. Thank you, sir.
I'm Vern Miyagi, the Administrator of Hawaii Emergency Management Agency. I deeply apologize for the trouble and heartbreak that we caused today. You know, we've spent the last few months trying to get ahead of this whole threat so that we could provide as much notification and preparation time to the public. Today was something that I regret because I accept responsibility for this. This is my team. We made a mistake. We're going to take processes and study this so that this doesn't happen again. Let me go over, you were distributed today a press release, I believe, hard copy. There's a timeline in that. I'd like to spend a few minutes just going over that timeline. At 0805 this morning, our state warning point, which is my 24/7 operation group, did a change of shift preparation, and at the end of each, the new incoming shift will do a check or a test of the ballistic missile preparation checklist. So at 0805, this test started. At 0807 is when the trigger is pulled on the test. The wrong button was pushed on this test. It went into an actual event versus a test. At 8:10 a.m., we of course got messages on our wireless remote system, on the telephones and so on, and calls that this had gone out. And at that point in time, we started the recall or the cancellation process. At 8:13 a.m., State Warning Point issued a cancellation of the civil danger warning message. And what it does is prevent any more messages going out. It doesn't issue a separate message canceling it. It just stops the messages from going out. At 8:20 a.m., Hawaii Emergency Management Agency issued a public notification of cancellation on the Facebook. At 8:24 a.m., Governor Ige retweets our message of the cancellation notice. At 8:30 a.m., Governor posts the cancellation notification on the Facebook page. And at 8:45 a.m., after getting authorization from FEMA's IPAWS, the Integrated Public Alert and Warning System, HIEMA issued a civil emergency message that verbally alerted people that a missile was not incoming and this was a false alarm. And that's where we were as the end of today. As far as the way ahead, I have to emphasize that this is what has been happening over the last few months, is our focus has been getting the out to the public. One thing that we have to work on more is the cancellation notice in this event. Our focus now, of course, is not to have any more false alarms going out, And by doing this, we're working on procedures that have already been implemented. First of all, the governor has directed that we hold off any more tests until we get this squared away. What has already been put in place is the two-person rule, that during a drill, there will always be 2 people there before the button is pushed, for both drills and for the actual alert. The other point is the cancellation message. We will have a cancellation template that's already been inserted, whereby that cancellation message already prescripted will go out and say that this is a false alarm and there's no missile inbound. I have to emphasize that at 8:10 a.m., right after this went out, General Logan called Pacific Command to confirm that there was no missile inbound, and that was our priority for us to make sure that that word got out. The other thing that we need to do is expanding the notification protocols so all of the governors, the mayors, the counties all understand that this is a false alarm. We need to make more contacts to notify that this was a false alarm. The other point is contact with the press and the media to make sure this goes out right away also. Again, I apologize for this. This is my responsibility and my team. But please keep in mind that, again, the threat is there. If this comes out, you're going to have only about 12 to 13 minutes of warning for an actual event, and please take this to heart. Again, I apologize for what's happened.
Aloha, good afternoon, everyone. My name is George Seghetti. I'm the CEO for the Hawaii Tourism Authority. Obviously, this is a day we'll never forget. Like everyone else, we're extremely concerned that this happened. But we're also encouraged, and I'm very encouraged, that we'll have all of the key decision makers and agencies now coming together, having serious dialogue to ensure that this never, ever happens again. Upon hearing the notice, we immediately reached out to airports, harbors, our 10 global partners. And in many instances, because of the time difference, we were able to message very quickly that this was a false alarm and hopefully mitigate any potential damage there. We spoke to all of our island chapters, our industry stakeholders, obviously very, very concerned, and we assured them that that there will, as I mentioned earlier, that there will be very serious dialogue between all of the decision makers and agencies to ensure it doesn't happen again. The important thing, I think, is that for us, the health, safety, and welfare of our visitors and our residents alike is always, always top priority. And we're going to do everything that we can ensure that that is there. And then the message I would like to be very clear when in speaking to our global partners is that Hawaii is open for business, is still perceived as the most safe, clean, welcoming destination in the world. And I'm confident we'll continue that message. Thank you.
With that, we open it up to your questions.
Governor, never say never. In a day of technology where you can do it live, why rely on canned audio notification?
You know, I think we have a combination. The notification process is a variety of different mechanisms. We have the sirens, you know, we have cell phones today, we have internet and social media mechanisms. We do know that we need to be able to broadcast messages across all platforms, and certainly that's what the intention was. You know, there was no automated way to send a false alarm cancellation. We had to initiate a manual process, and that was why it took a while to notify everyone.
Isn't there a way to connect it to when you have such things as Nixle alerts where it could come out that fast, much faster? Wouldn't that be a better option?
Well, certainly we will be looking at, we've already implemented some actions to speed the process so that the public would be notified faster, but we are evaluating all of the processes that we currently have to ensure that we can provide the notice to the public as soon as possible.
So to clarify, the 38 minutes that transpired between the initial alert going out and the false alarm notification was the result of the time that you guys needed to manually take control
No,
of the system?
well, it's a couple things. If you look at the timeline, certainly we had sent notification that it was a false alarm much earlier than the 38 minutes.
Right.
The 38-minute interval is really the interval that we had to manually go through the process to provide notification on the smartphones and cell phones. We did have other notification that occurred much sooner than that.
Right, on
But it
Twitter and
wasn't-
on Facebook, but not everyone is plugged into these social media platforms.
Right.
They rely on these mass notifications via mobile devices or the sirens, which in some cases did go off in certain communities.
Yes, the sirens was separate, and a few of them went off, but most of them did not because they're not involved with this test.
So the clarification then is, why were those sirens triggered when you guys were already issuing a correction that it was a false alarm?
Well, we have to check on that. That's when we do the monthly test. But the drill that was done this morning was only for the emergency alert system, which is the TV radio, and then the wireless emergency alert system, which is your cell phones.
Is the real alert supposed to work then, where you would get this notification, and then are the sirens supposed to go after
That's
that?
correct. But because this is an internal test or drill, we don't want the sirens to go off publicly.
So why did the sirens go
We
off?
have to review that. We have to test. But again, it's an internal drill, so the sirens are not supposed to go off outside. This is just to make sure the warning point personnel know exactly what process to follow to initiate if this was a real event.
And if there's a situation you're saying it was the wrong button was pushed,
Yes.
I guess give us a little clear. So there are buttons on a panel.
It
One
is-
person pushes a certain button, and there's no sort of a safety guard where they say, "Are you sure you want to push that button?"
It's a screen. It's more like a mouse click. It's a screen, a test button, and an actual. Okay, the wrong button was passed.
But
Was
once
pressed.
that button is pushed, that's it. It goes
That's it.
through.
That's correct.
There's no sort of redundancy whatsoever.
I was going to say that the old process was no redundancy. We've implemented changes already to assure that it becomes a redundant process so that it won't be a single individual. There'll be at least two people that would be involved to initiate the alert.
You mean since this morning you've implemented that?
Yes, that's correct. That's correct.
So to clarify, with a mouse click, someone sent out this mass alert saying that this is not a drill, shelter in place immediately. And by the time the next alert went out to the masses and those 38 minutes has passed, you guys had obviously already clarified that it was a false alarm.
Yes.
But
That's
there were
correct.
still sirens that had started going.
We apologize for the interruption. We'll rejoin that press conference as soon as we can. And we do have two reporters there who will also fill us in case we missed anything. But the gist of what happened in that press conference so far was Governor Ige first issuing an apology for the pain and confusion. He said he is angry and disappointed. He'll make sure a false alarm does not happen again. And there was no automated way to issue an immediate false alarm cancellation. It is a process, and that's what we were just listening to. Let's now go back to the press conference.
There is again, it's a human error. There is a screen that says, are you sure you want to do this? Okay, again, that's already in place. Now, we had one person, human error, and that thing was pushed anyway.
So
They not only triggered
by
the
having
alert, they
redundancy,
also pressed yes?
Yes.
There was a two-step process.
Yeah, there is a
Press yes in both situations.
Right.
so by having redundancy, having two people, you've got 12 to 13 minutes to alert the public. How much of a delay will this?
There would be no delay in this case. Right now, the process would be the OTS or the person in charge of the warning point at that shift would be the one to either push it or oversee to make sure that there's two people there when we push the button.
I'm sorry, to clarify, there was a redundancy in place then. Someone clicks to send out this mass message,
Yes.
and then someone also clicked to say yes.
It's the same person.
Did he explain why then he did it twice.
I can't explain that. That's like I said, it's a human error that we're going to fix.
We understand it's a mistake, but what are the consequences as the result of the kind of just mass hysteria and confusion that was launched this morning as a result of a human error?
What's the consequence? The consequence of this is obviously bad. I'm working on credibility now because we've worked so hard to get this in place. That's why I want to tell the public right now is, again, this was a mistake on our part. But don't let that stop as far as the preparation and the warning time if this happens for real. So in my case, you know, you watch the news right now, they're talking. Kim Jong-un is talking to the South so that the tensions are getting better. So when I heard this morning, I thought this has got to be a false alarm because that's not happening. And our outreach to the public and our training is, again, keep informed of what's going on in the tension between the two countries and keep monitor that. So again, when I saw this today, when I heard this today, I thought something was wrong. It was a false alarm, mainly because the tensions were not there to start something like this. Again, that's this should not have happened, and we're going to work hard to make sure this is not going to happen again, as the governor said. And we're going to work the cancellation process and the notification process to be much better, so this doesn't go through what we went through this morning.
Did you guys not consider?
The individual who is responsible, will they have consequences?
Well, the consequences, they'll be, of course, counseled and drilled so that this never happens again. And to be honest, this is a shake-up here. I mean, we're not going to do this again. The people here that went through this will definitely not do this again because they don't want to cause all this heartbreak.
Will there be counseling? Will there be any sort of suspension or be relieved of their duties because of this?
Well, again, personnel issues. I'm not going to answer personnel issues. They'll be counseled and trained so that this doesn't happen again. I mean, you got to know this guy feels bad, right? I mean, he's not doing this on purpose. It was a mistake on his part. He feels terrible about it, and it won't happen again.
Has he been working here a long time?
Again, another person. He's been here a while. Okay.
I have another question in regards to the mass message that did go out on mobile devices. Not every carrier provided an alert. Can you clarify why that happened? Because in a real situation, everyone would need to know.
I would say that we hope to learn from what happened today, and that is one of the questions that we are asking. Why is it that some of the people didn't get the alert message on their phones? We want to understand which carriers delivered the message and whether all of their subscribers received the message. Same thing, so we want to be clear about who received the message and who didn't.
Do you have a general idea of how many people received the message, or how many?
We don't have that right now. We are asking for that information from the carriers.
Did it go out to all the islands?
Yes.
All the islands?
Yes.
On the carrier thing, you know, certain carriers have it. So there are gaps. We're going to need to identify carriers don't have it, talk to them, and make sure that it gets on. And that's to do.
Can you talk about what you want people to know with regard to being able to gain their trust in this system?
We want the people to know that we are disappointed and angry that this happened. We do know that everyone on the island was affected in some way. We understand that. We are committed to providing the public with a good notification system. We do understand that there is a short window for us to inform the public and for them to respond. We encourage the public to follow the recommendations if this should happen, to get inside, stay inside and get informed, because that's what they need to do. We have already taken action to make changes to assure that this doesn't happen again. We will continue to work through that process. We will identify other procedures and opportunities that we can put into place to ensure that this doesn't happen again.
We're still reeling from the Randall Saito escape, which made national news, and now this. This has got to hurt the entire state as far as reputation.
You know, certainly we have, as General had been saying, we have been balancing the interest of the public and providing a notification system in light of the world that we live in today. and that there is a possibility of a ballistic attack. So we believe that it's in the best interest of the public to have a system of notification that we can provide notice should an event occur. It's very, very unfortunate that a false alarm was issued today, and we will take action to assure that a false alarm never happens again.
And you're confident that you have this sort of taken care of?
Yes, absolutely.
I'd like to clarify. So there is one individual who, clicking a mouse button, can send out this mass notification, and then there is a separate individual who triggers the sirens. What is the communication between those two systems so that if it were a real deal, as you mentioned, first the alert would go out, then the sirens would turn on? What's to ensure that that process is, in fact, the integrity of that has been preserved?
In an actual event, those two people are sitting side by side.
Okay.
Okay, so it'll be simultaneously.
Which is why some sirens did not go off, because that person knew immediately it was a mistake.
I believe that could be the case, but again, I have to take a look into that. And we're working on a written report on this as far as what happened, what the fixes are going to be, and the way ahead is going to be.
One of the challenges as a member of the media is that we did not have access to information right away. So what procedures, what policies will now change as people turn immediately to the internet, turn their TVs on, put on the radio to try to get credible, clear information?
The process is, again, getting that cancellation notice out as soon as possible with the new template that we have in there. And then again, for a false alarm, we have to make sure that we have clear lines to the media, all the stations, through our public information people, to get it simultaneously out. So that has to be worked and tested again.
You've talked about the challenge of getting that second manual alert drafted and pushed out. Had this scenario that a false alarm could potentially have gone out and that you would need to have a quick turnaround with another push alert, had your agency not considered even this scenario, even this possibility before it happened?
As far as the final template that went out with the cancel, this message is a false alarm, that was not put in yet. That was done outside. That was done manually. So that's going to be in the future.
Why isn't that template not there?
Well, like I said, again, this is on me. Our focus was getting the notification out to the folks. As far as a false alarm, again, I did not focus on getting that template in there.
I think the public is understandably shooken up. They understand, though, now that you're saying this was human error, but it still begs the question whether or not there was enough information about what people really should do if this, in fact, was a real ballistic missile attack. So if you could take this time now, because I know these are the questions we're going to be answering over the next several days. Specifically, what do you do if you're at home, if you're on the highway, if you're in the elevator of a high-rise hotel or building? What are the steps you should immediately take?
See, these are very, very good questions. On our public outreach over the last few months, this is what we've been going over, on and on and on. Town hall meetings, Capitol briefings, and so on. Again, get inside, and stay tuned. If you're every person should know ahead of time. When we say shelter in place, if something like this triggers again, if I'm at home, where do I go? If I'm driving to work, where do I go? If I'm at work, where do I go? Same all the way through. For all members of your family, so that when you take shelter in place, you don't have to worry about your family because you know what they're going to do. But what we put out on our website and all of our outreach and the material that we have gives you an idea of what type of shelter to look for. Again, for radiation, it's always time, distance, and barriers. So get away from the radiation, get inside as far as you can, put concrete between you and the radiated area, and get inside of your building, away from glass. If you're on the highway, stop your vehicle. If you can't go anyplace, get down to the bottom of your vehicle, or get out of your vehicle if you have time, the 13 minutes, and get into a high-rise or any kind of constructed concrete building that's close by. Again, planning ahead of time so you know what you're going to do ahead of time. Don't look for that shelter in place when it's inbound. Again, I regret what happened this morning, but it brings this awareness up to speed again of what to expect and what to do. What to expect and that's what we do at emergency management, is to get that information out to the public.
How long have you been doing this ballistic missile checklist?
This started about when we did the first siren test, November 1st.
So they've been doing this 3 times a day?
This is on About 3 times a day, but it's not mandated. It's just a routine test for the new shifts coming on. But we've been doing this since about November, again, with no problems until today.
Could you explain again how this could possibly happen? It was one person, and when he said, you sure you want to do this? He said yes, but now you're taking action to have 2 people.
Correct.
And they'll both get the same. Do you still want to do this? Both of them will get that, or how will this work?
The entire staff will get this. It'll be 2 individual people that do this. The first one that puts it in, and when it says verification, do you really want to do this? Another person will do it.
Another person will say yes.
Did the other person actually push the button for the siren, the physical sirens to sound?
One person pushed them. Both.
One person pushed the text alert.
It was the same individual for both.
But they're asking about the sirens.
The sirens,
the siren is a separate thing. Again, your question about why some went up is excellent. I need to find out about that. But as I understand, there was about 1 or 2, not the entire state. So I have to follow up on that.
but it was not initiated up here in this office, so we
Okay,
don't.
so I'm sorry, we do really want to make sure that we clarify this. So we've gotten multiple reports, including video that was sent into Hawaii News Now, of sirens.
Sounds going off?
Yes.
Yeah.
Most of them were in proximity of military bases.
Right.
We were later told that there is a chance that the military may have manually triggered their own sirens. Is that?
No, so we, if you have information about where locations where sirens went off, we definitely would welcome that information. We will be going through. The sirens should not have gone off. It was not part of this test. The fact that some sirens were triggered is information to us, and we definitely want to know which sirens were triggered so we can follow up about why that occurred.
And again, to clarify, it's a completely different individual who would have been responsible for issuing the alert than the individual who pushes or clicks the mouse button to issue out the mass text message.
That's correct.
Will anybody be retrained? Everybody's retrained on this?
Everybody will go through this training.
You mentioned the 3 minutes in between going out and the cancellation. Why does it take 3 minutes for you guys to get the alert and to cancel the text?
Well, this is you're talking about the
So it went out at
Twitter.
8:10, and then you said at 8:13 the cancellation preventing it from further disseminating went out. Why is there a 3-minute? If you just can push it and see immediately that it went out, why does it take 3 minutes to cancel?
Well, it's a couple. Look at the timeline. We consolidated information from different individuals. So if you look at the timeline, the 3-minute difference obviously is I got notification, General Logan got notification. So obviously he's using his resources to confirm, just as I am doing what I can do to confirm. The people in the alert center here don't have that information. So certainly they were not aware immediately that they had issued an error, right? So they're sitting in the access point, and then the phone goes off, and they are starting to try and understand. So they definitely was a period of time that they were not aware that they issued an error, and it took them a couple minutes to verify that. General Logan, when he got the alert, called PACOM, because he understands what the explicit process is to verify whether there was in fact a launch or not. And obviously he went through his protocol and confirmed that there was no launch. And then he responded to the people that he called me, he called others, to inform them that yes, in fact, the alert was an error. And we began the process to inform the public.
So your own employee didn't realize that they had triggered this mistake until they received the mass communication on their mobile device?
No.
Primarily, yes.
Did you ask him why he said, yes, I really want to do this?
No. It wasn't.
It just...
You're asking someone, why did you make a mistake? I mean, it was not intentional, it was a mistake. Asking him why he made a mistake, I'm not sure what his answer is going to be. He made a mistake. He knows that.
Yeah. So if we can talk about now the safeguards that are in place to, again, work toward building back the integrity and trust that your department clearly needs in an island state where
Yes.
we do face real danger, not just from the possibility of a ballistic missile, but a tsunami, a hurricane, so many other things that we have to be more readily prepared for than other communities. What are the now safeguards in place, clearly, to prevent a potential mistake from happening again?
So a couple things. We have suspended the tests, so the routine activities will be suspended until we can implement appropriate changes. As I said, we've already implemented some of the changes to ensure that more than one person is involved with that. We definitely learned that some of the notifications, some of the sirens did not work, and we need to understand what that is. You know, on a going forward basis, we do intend to continue the monthly siren test and other tests as we have done in the past. You know, we believe that it's imperative that we continue to exercise the alert system. We recognize that this false alarm is a terrible thing to happen, and we have implemented changes already to assure that it doesn't happen again. We will further refine the processes as we go forward to make sure that we can put in better safeguards to prohibit this from happening.
How many personnel does it take to run the 24/7 operation?
Well, right now we have, for the manning that we have here is about 3 to 4 people, 8 hour shifts. That's the best
plans
minimum.
to make that additional staffing, or maybe even look at fatigue as part of the problem?
Not at this time. With 3 to 4 personnel is pretty substantial for us.
Is there a plan to put more messaging than just shelter in place in that initial warning message? A lot of people have said that there was a lack of information in that initial message, and for those who may not have heard the other information or been to public hearing, is there a way to include more information in that initial message that goes out?
Well, we'll take a look at that. But again, there's a limit on the number of spaces that we put in that message. And that what we've done over the past months is to coordinate that message with Pacific Command as far as what data that we can put in from them and what guidance we can put out. Again, it's getting ahead of it. If you're going to rely on guidance on that one message, that's not enough. You have to get ahead of it and go to our website and see what our guidance is in the past, because that gives you a pretty good idea of what to do and what.
So there are people that travel here and will not get those briefings and not know to be aware of that kind of knowledge. Is there any plan to make them aware of that possibility?
Yes, we're working. You know, when we say protect, it's the public and the visitors. But you know, George is here. We work with Hawaii Tourism Agency and work to get this message out to the visitors also.
We did. As soon as we got the messaging, we reached out to all the stakeholders, spoke to them very early. Mr. Gibson from the Hilton Hawaiian Village, for example, called him very early. And they already had an action plan in place, and they notified all of the visitors. All the hotels did that. As I mentioned earlier, it's always, I mean, we're an island, so we're always preparing for some type of disaster, and the hotels take this very, very seriously, as well as the activities people, and making sure that not only the visitors are safe, but the residents as well that work in Waikiki.
So when the alert is issued, then the hotels do notify all the visitors, all their guests, of what they need to do.
Absolutely.
With the shelter in place as well as everything else.
Absolutely, absolutely, and they talk to each other.
How do you notify the guests? Just curious. Like within that time frame of, say, 12 minutes from when you get that initial notification, how would you say notify the guests?
I would have to talk to them specifically, but they told me, they reassured me. I mean, they had a drill in place, even when I talked to Jerry about not only the employees, but all the residents getting down into shelters and what have you. So they have an action plan in place. Don't know the exact time.
Since this was a mistake, do you worry about the hit that this can take potentially?
As I said, we're very, very concerned this even happened, but we're confident with all the dialogue that's going to be going on, it won't happen again. But sure, our stakeholders were very, very concerned about that. But it's just too early to tell what kind of collateral damage this might be on it. That's where we're in conversations already all morning with our global partners, reassuring them that this was a mistake, it won't happen again, and that we are open for business.
Warren, I don't know if you're the best person for this question, but if this was the real deal, how would this have happened? PATCOM would have been alerted that a ballistic missile is incoming, and they contact you. Can you walk me through that process? And also, More specifically, how much time we legitimately have if this was actually happening?
Okay, the things that we've worked out to give the public as much warning and prep time as possible, we're talking about only a 20-minute launch to impact time from North Korea, just 20 minutes. Okay, PACOM and the military needs about 5 minutes to characterize the launch. In other words, is it going Guam? Is it going Hawaii? Is it going over us? So they need that 5 minutes. Within that five minutes, there is what is called Missile Event Conference. PACOM is in there, DHS, FEMA is in there. Once they make a determination that it's inbound and Hawaii is in danger, we will get messages here at the state warning point from PACOM and NORAD or from FEMA's emergency system. And based on that notification, our warning point personnel have the authority to go ahead and push the button. They don't have to call me, the governor, or the TAG. They have the authority to go push the button so that we can compress the timeline that our people have as much as possible. And that's the process right now.
If you know that it was an internal error, why was it necessary to get FEMA's authorization first to send out the cancellation?
Well, there is a process whereby the WEA, the Wireless Emergency Alert System, is something that is not allowed to be tested. You know, the cell phone, we can't issue a test every month like we do for the sirens. So for us to use that, we had to make sure that we could get that out. And one of our personnel, Ryan Hirai, in the IT side, got the approval, and we got it out as soon as we could. We will work on that to make sure that we can get that out right away.
Sounds like right now it's way too easy to send something out of the initial test, but there's just way too much logging in terms of getting it.
Exactly.
Getting the return.
So this put things in our face that we have to fix, and that's what we're going to be doing.
Just to make sure there isn't the possibility that the system got hacked in any way, which is why this happened.
Well, I think that was clarified. Wait,
There definitely was no hacking involved. It was human error.
Byron, as head of the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency, and you've been doing these workshops and getting the word out, and with PSAs, what are the most important lessons you personally learned from what happened today?
Well, from today, I think the most important things that we learn is how we stop this from ever happening again. And that I kind of gave you some of the process that we're doing. But I think the other thing is what we've learned from this, the questions that was brought out about what to do, all of that has to be emphasized again because we have such a short time. This idea of a shelter in place, having a plan ahead of time, knowing where you're going to go ahead of time, where to go, what to do, when to do it, that is for all hazards, for all of our folks. You know, you asked a question about tsunamis and hurricanes. What about the other hazards? Okay, this doesn't apply to that as far as the timeline. But again, know where to go, know what to do, know when to do it. Have a plan for yourself and your families for all times of the day, for all hazards. Not just for this, kind of kicks it up a bit, but again, for hurricanes, tsunamis, same thing, get ahead of it. Each individual should have a plan.
If you don't mind, then if you can go through this template again of being able to cancel an alert and ensure that most people get it, that this is cancellation.
Yeah.
Can you go through that, please?
Again, what the template will have, it'll be a pre-scripted message saying this is a false alarm. I don't have the wording right now, but this is about 38 minutes later. But it will specify that this is a false alarm. A missile is not inbound. That's for the cancellation.
And how will it will go out?
It'll go out the same way the initial announcement went out about the incoming, the warning. It'll go the same way and say that was a mistake and this is a cancellation of that.
Get it out faster than what happened today.
It'll be a template within the screen, and they can just push that. We need to work on the process.
So I think part of it is that we didn't have a process in place to send a message. We didn't have a message scripted that said this is a false alarm. You know, we were not prepared for that. The fact that an alert was issued, that was incorrect. So we have built that now, and so clearly, just as there's a button to initiate the alerts, there now is a button to initiate the cancellation. Now we will continue to evaluate and strengthen that process Part of that was we were going through, there was no automatic process to initiate the fact that it was a false alarm. So we went through the processes to inform the media, social media, and all of that manually because it was not automated prior to today's activity.
Can you clarify, moving forward for the future, what exactly shelter in place means? I mean, given the fact that most people don't have a basement or shelter within their own homes or even workplaces, what exactly would you like individuals to do?
Okay, let's take the missile event. Again, like I said, shelter in place is something that we use a lot. The schools use it, shelter in place, if there's a active shooter or that kind of event, shelter in place. But the point is, shelter in place means you don't have time to go look for a designated shelter or so on. So shelter in place, like I said in the beginning, is for this event, you're looking for concrete, you're looking for rocks, bricks, and so on. So you should have ahead of time where that shelter in place is. You won't have time to get up, pick up your family, call your loved ones, get your car, pick them up, and go to a shelter. Shelter in place means you have to take care of yourself and shelter in the best place that you can.
It means in this particular case, if the threat were a ballistic missile, that you need to be inside.
That's
so
correct.
If you're out at Ala Moana Beach Park, run to the bathroom.
Any place that you can get inside, because this thing about get inside, and stay tuned will save lives.
So it doesn't matter how far up you are. It doesn't matter if the structure is an old single plywood home. So long as you're inside a building, and that's meant to protect you from radiation?
Right. The first part, again, is the shelters that we talk about. They are not blast shelters, and we're talking fallout shelters. It is what it is. Where you are at that point in time, you can't change that. Single family home and no basement, you got to just get to the center of that. If you're in an apartment building, you want to get away from the fallout where it'll settle, get to the bottom of the building, into the basement if possible. Get closest to the center of the building. And that's that's all we can do. That's all you can do. And the farther away you get from the radiation and the longer, it decays very rapidly. So if you can do that, that's the best you can do.
You had mentioned that 12 to 13-minute window to respond if there is a real threat. What would happen if there's a real threat? Do we just look for that emergency alert and there's only going to be one message saying that there's an incoming ballistic missile? And
You have three sources of notification. One is the wireless emergency alert system, the cell phones. Then we have the EAS, which is the emergency alert system, television, radio, interrupt the broadcast, then you see the message. And the last resort is the sirens. If you hear the wailing attack tone siren, that's your last notification. We have three methods, and that's all we have right now.
so if we get an emergency alert and you turn on the television and you're not getting that screen on the bottom saying that this is a real situation, you can assume that there's some kind of error?
Well, what made you turn on your TV?
If you get that emergency alert like you did today.
On your smartphone? I'd use that.
So
you don't have time to look for a TV and turn it on.
What he's saying is it's supposed to happen simultaneously.
That's correct.
Right? So if you don't see the alert on TV, but you got the message, you have to assume that it's an
That's
error.
correct. Well, if you have it on your phone, and if it's not a test day, I would use that.
This might be a basic question, but why doesn't PACCOM, why aren't they, as the ones who can verify and track the launches and such, why aren't they the ones issuing the alert? Why is there this two-tier system that opens us up to this potential error?
I do think that PACOM would have a whole lot more important things to worry about. I think that they are definitely, PACOM has their mission to keep the country and all of the people safe. Civil defense here in Hawaii has the responsibility to inform our people and keep them safe. So we definitely have lots of conversations that go back between PACOM and Hawaii Civil Defense. We share a lot of information. We are in contact with them all the time. We do believe that state civil defense and county civil defense, for that matter, are the appropriate individuals to inform our greater constituencies.
Can PACOM serve sort of as a backup system in the sense that if it is a false alarm and being able to just say it is a false alarm?
So they would be able to notify the people on their bases that it would be a false alarm. And that's what the call was this morning, immediately to find out, one, there was no missile threat. So I immediately, because I didn't hear a siren, when I saw the alert system, I immediately thought something is wrong. So I called in over here to validate that, and then I called PACOM to get a second opinion that there was no inbound missile, so that when I let the governor know, I can have him all the facts and provide him the utmost information as immediately as possible. Adding PACOM into this mix, that's not really their role. Is looking outward, as the governor says, to protect the nation and our friends and allies in the Pacific area. So the state of Hawaii, while they are concerned about the state of Hawaii because their people live here, they have access to and information control within the bases.
But it's civilian rule over military authority. PACOM still has to answer to the President of the United States. They can't act on their own.
Right, but this was, if you remember, this was an internal test that was internally generated by the state warning point through HAIMA. PACOM had nothing to do with this, other than the fact that if a real-world event happens, they are informing us of what happens. Governor's responsible for the state of Hawaii and all the people within the state of Hawaii, as we are, and it's our job to notify.
I'm sorry, you said earlier, you said the internal test that you did, was it this monthly also, or is it just weekly, or how is that?
This is an occasional internal checklist, as General Miyagi said, that routine test that the change of shift works to go through their checklist to make sure they understand the protocols.
Okay, not every shift, but routine.
Yes.
Every few weeks.
It's up to the warning point and our ops chief about when they do this, but it's been routine. We've been doing this since about November of last year. And this is the first time we've had this problem.
At every shift change?
Not every shift change. It's on a routine basis, but it's not a directed schedule thing.
When they push the other button, not the real deal button, when they push that test button, where does that go? What happens?
It's the same thing that we do every December, every workday. The beginning of the workday. There's a siren that's done that. But on this button, what it is on the ballistic missile side, you're talking about the test now. Okay, I stand correct. This is not the sirens. This is just the EAS and WEA system. It goes out and that's it.
It stays internally within this building. It doesn't go out. It doesn't come to my phone, doesn't come to Vern's phone or the governor's phone that this is a test. It's just an internal system test that's done through a checklist within this building.
It should not have gone out.
Because we want the state warning point people to walk through the checklist to be able to do this in a timely fashion in the event it really happens, so that the 1.4 million people that are in the state of Hawaii are aware of and can react to a real incoming missile. That's why, and you only have 15 minutes plus or minus to do that. So we have to make sure that our people are well versed in the checklist. And we've been doing this for months. It just so happened today, instead of the person individually hitting the test button, they accidentally hit the real button.
How do you quantify, of the 1.4 million people who live here in Hawaii, who actually did receive this and who didn't in the event that it is a real emergency?
We have to, working through the counties have some idea of as far as who got the notification. We got all these calls, so we're documenting that also. This thing about the two different cell phone carriers, we got calls on that already, so we need to meet with them to verify what the situation is with each carrier. So that's going to be working on.
We know, though, that the most vulnerable of our communities, right, the elderly, the homeless, those who are less fortunate, they may not have access to the kind of technology that would have provided this alert via phone, via TV broadcast. And what if they live in one of those communities where a siren is or isn't working as well? What is the plan for that?
Well, again, the plan is on our website, public outreach. Again, this is family resilience. This is individual resilience. It's people taking care of each other and their kapuna, or the people that they have to work this out. I've had personal comments about I live by myself in a family home. There's nobody there. We have to work to the communities so the communities can identify where these needs are and take care of each other. We have the CERT program, the Community Emergency Response Team program, the HARP program, where communities step up and take care of each other within the communities. That's the only way we can do this. It's people working together like we do in Lava, like we do in Hurricane Iniki. That's the only way we can do this.
In a real situation, would you be sending multiple emergency alert texts?
In a real emergency, I think that alert system would continue on for about an hour. But then, as soon as the all clear or it's determined that there is no threat, then we will go on the AMF rate or the same methods of communication to let everybody know that there is no, it's all clear.
But how about the emergency text? Would you send only one, or is there going to be?
No, there will be a follow-up if there is no threat.
If there's a real threat.
If there is a real.
More than one text message if it's a real threat.
Yes.
Every minute you're going to send an update?
As long as we have information from Pacific Command that there is a threat, that message will be outgoing.
Vern, when you said this person made a mistake, on that test, you hit the real button instead of test. Does it say like test ballistic missile, real ballistic missile, test hurricane, real?
No.
What does it say?
It's for this one. Well, I can't give you. It's the actual, and this is the test. If you want the exact wording, I could give you, but there's a designation between the two.
Actual button and test.
Yes.
But I mean, the difference between a ballistic missile versus hurricane.
Well, hurricane is different because it's a steady tone, and there's.
But you were doing it on ballistic today.
That's correct.
Only. Okay.
Yes.
And just to let all of you know, and to help ease the mind of the public, that we apologize for what happened today. But we are going to do a thorough investigation. We'll put that report together, and Vernon and myself and the governor will get this information out to you so you all know exactly what happened, so we can answer all the questions. We have a good idea what happened. We're very well aware of already making changes as the governor has directed us to do, and so we're getting way ahead of this as far as the future of this ever happening again. We are confident that this will not happen again, and we will work towards that, and we'll get this report out to all of you that I think you deserve.
I do have two more questions, if possible. If this had happened on a Monday through Friday basis, what would have happened within the school system alert process? And also, what is the protocol report supposed to follow? Because we're hearing reports of individuals being deplaned off airlines. Yeah. We're hearing that pilots circled and didn't land. Can you clarify what should or would happen if this were the real deal?
I think we're still working through all the information as to the actual events that did occur, as far as when the notice went out. I do know that I had contact with security personnel at the airport, and we did talk to them and get the word out. I know the Honolulu Police Department immediately at about 8:10 called into the state warning point this morning, got validation that it was a false alarm, and they put that out to their officers who went out on PA systems throughout the city and county of Honolulu to get that information out to the public as much as they could with the time that they had. And so there was a lot of things happening behind the scenes, knowing that this was a false alarm, to get that out there. So, but that's part of our investigation, is to find out everything that happened, and then how do we ensure that we can put fixes in to make sure those things don't happen. But it appears that people did react to what the message said, and unfortunately this is a false alarm, and we did have people that took action, which is exactly what we're asking them to do, and not look at this as a mistake. We're not going to trust anybody again, but that they take action when in fact they're directed to.
Did the military deploy any jets at all from this?
Not to my knowledge, they did not, because they had, like I said, at PACOM, they didn't have any information that there was an incoming missile. So once they talked with me, they knew that this was a false alarm.
What was the atmosphere like inside the room where this took place? How many people were there? And once it became apparent what had happened, was it frantic? Can you give a sense of how that played out?
Well, there was deep concern, let me put that. They were trying to get all these calls answered, and they were passing out information to myself, to Joe Logan and the governor, to make sure that they were frantically working, trying to get this message, the cancellation message out. Okay. We can take maybe another question, and then we have to get back to work. I'm sorry.
Bottom line, what is it that you'd like to say to the people and also visitors of Hawaii?
We are sorry that this false alarm had occurred. We are committed to ensure that it never happens again. We have already taken action to minimize that possibility by suspending the test and already implemented a process to ensure that at least 2 people are involved with that process. And we are committed to ensure that the public is notified when there is an emergency. And we are working very hard to assure that they are never again given a false alarm.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very
I'm
much.
sure you're going to have additional follow-up questions and whatnot, so you know how to get a hold of us. We'll be more than happy to accommodate that. Appreciate your time, everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Again, that was a press conference at Hawaii Emergency Management Agency, which is in Diamond Head Crater. And at the press conference, as you saw, Governor David Ige, George Zaghetti, the president and CEO of the Hawaii Tourism Authority, Vern Miyagi, who is the administrator of the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency, and Major General Arthur Logan. And they did come with the timeline of what happened once that alert was, and in fact before the alert was issued. At 8:05 a.m. they said that the state warning checklist, or a test, started, which is routine and has been since November 1st. At 8:07 the false alarm was triggered, and that was by one person who not only pressed the false alarm button, but the follow-up question, are you sure you would like to do this? Apparently he mistakenly pressed that as well, and that's what triggered the release of the false alarm. It did take another about 3 minutes before some of the authorities, for example, Governor Ige, found out that it was indeed a false alarm, and they did that through phone calls and so forth. And they started to release the information of that it was indeed a false alarm through Twitter, through phone calls, through Facebook, and so forth. One of the problems revealed through what happened this morning is that there was no automated template that could as easily be sent out to cell phones and so forth, saying it was a false alarm. And that is one of the things that the state is now working on getting in place, an automated text alert or system that will automatically, much sooner than the 38 minutes that people had to wait, to say it was a false alarm. And also, it was, again, 8:45 before the large text alert, the mass text alert was sent that it was a false alarm, but people knew ahead of time, first and foremost, through what you heard PACOM, which is Pacific Command here in Hawaii, which is the one that confirms whether indeed there is an incoming ballistic missile. Now, we have 2 reporters who are at the press conference who are there at the agency, Manolo Morales and Elisa Revelo, and we'd like to join them now.
Hey, Kathy. Yes, thanks for sticking with us. That was that press conference was over an hour long. Lots of information was dispersed. So the main 3 things they wanted to get out about what happened is that they are sorry. They deeply regret and apologize for this mistake that happened. They said it was human error. It was not a result of hacking. They said that they are committed to make sure that it won't happen again, and we're told changes have already been put in place to make sure that it does not happen again. Now, you just read over that timeline, Kathy, but we want to go over it again just to give people who might be watching and just tuning in an idea of what happened. So about 8:05 this morning, a routine internal test during a shift change was initiated. This test involved the emergency alert system, but no warning sirens. At 8:07, the warning test was triggered statewide. At 8:10, the state general validated with the U.S. Pacific Command that there was no missile launch. At 8:13 a.m., the state warning issued a cancellation of this warning message, and at that point we're told that there was a message sent so that no other warning messages could go out. Now, bear with us. We've got a lot of information to share with you guys. Let's see. At 8:20, so a lot of people were wondering why did it take so long for another alert to go out, but Governor Ige and Civil Defense wanted to clarify that they did try to send out a message on social media at 8:20, so about 15 minutes or so after that message went out. They put it out on social media. Governor Ige retweeted it on Twitter that this was a false alarm, there was no threat.
Well, there is a lot of information, but we're also finding out a little bit more about how this human error occurred. And the administrator, Vernon Miyagi, tells us that what happened was it's like clicking on the mouse on the button. And what happened was, okay, they were doing an internal test, and he was supposed to hit a different button, but he hit the button that, of course, was the wrong one. Also finding out that once he hit that button, he was the worker that pressed it was asked, do you want to do this? So there was a sort of another step that he had to take, and he still went ahead and pressed that button. So it's still kind of one of those things where it's not clear why he or she still pressed that button, but that's what happened. Now, as far as getting the word out, as far as the cancellation, part of the reason we've been told is why it took that long is there is no template that would say that this was a mistake or that this was a drill. And what it is so that's why it took several more minutes before everyone was informed that this was a false alarm. So what the governor and the other state officials are now telling us here is that they have already put together a template that would be ready and be put in place in case that there is another false alarm. At least people would know much faster that it has been a mistake and that there's nothing to worry about. So those are the things that, and also what they're telling us is another improvement they're making is next time when they do this test, instead of one person pressing the button, it will be two people there. The first person does it, and then the second person will have to press the second button to make sure that they are doing the right one, whether it's the drill or the real alert.
We were told earlier that the employees who sent that alert weren't even aware that they had sent it out until they received that message on their phone. So obviously there was a lot of panic and chaos at that moment trying to fix that mistake and make sure that everything was taken care of. Like Manolo had said, there was no automated way to issue that threat, or excuse me, that it was a false alarm. Now, want to go over some of the safeguards that he also just talked about, said that they're making sure there's more than one person. They are going to stop these routine tests for now. They will continue with the monthly test, but these routine tests that they've been doing during the shift change, they plan to stop that until they can get all of the procedures worked out and figure out where those vulnerable places are at. In those procedures, they just obviously do not want this to happen again. Now, let's see. Excuse me, going over all of these notes here. Like we said, guys, this was over an hour-long press conference. I think another thing to touch up on, we were hearing that some people got the alert on their cell phones, others didn't. Some people saw it, heard sirens. We're being told that those sirens should not have gone off. They don't know why they went off, but they are looking into that. They are also trying to identify the gaps in cell phone carriers, why some people received that message and why others didn't. And they said they're working on a written report, and they will have that out to us as soon as they can. Just another thing about this routine, they've been doing this checklist and this test since November, and they said this is the first time that there's ever been a mistake.
Yeah, so still some questions to remain unanswered, specifically as far as those sirens, why some sirens did go off, because what we've been told is that's actually done separately, and somebody else does that, and it's actually isn't even done here. So that's one of the questions why, or that's why there were no answers yet, why the sirens didn't, or some of the sirens did actually alarm, and what it's not supposed to do that at all, because what it was an internal test that was supposed to happen here as far as the ballistic missile test that was happening. So there's still questions in that. And then again, as far as the cell phone carriers, no answers there as far as why some got it and why some didn't. So that's something they still need to look into.
Right, and we also, there was obviously somebody here with the Hawaii Tourism. They were telling us that hotel visitors were notified that once their people got the alert on their phone, they started making calls, and that visitors were notified. And earlier, in our other cut-ins, you were hearing that the beaches were empty, people were going inside. Something they also wanted to stress, that even though this was a mistake that they deeply regret, they say that this should remind people to be prepared, that this is still a threat that could happen. A very unlikely threat, but it could happen, and they want to use this also as a reminder that people need to be prepared, that if this is a real event, you should seek shelter, stay inside, and stay tuned. To clarify, if this was a real event, they said 3 things would have happened. That first, the alert would have been sent out on the cell phone. Second, you would have seen an alert on your radio or your television. Those happened simultaneously. And third, you would have heard sirens. So that's the 3 steps that would have happened had this been a real event. And once again, they're trying to identify all of those areas where there were gaps in the cell phone carriers, why some sirens went off and why some didn't. Again, we're told those should not have gone off at all. I think that's the majority of what was covered today. Yeah, we exactly. There was a lot that went on, obviously, but we will definitely stay on top of this and let you know what else comes out of the situation. We'll be on top of that written report and make sure we stay here with KHON2 on air and online for the latest. We'll send it back to you guys in the studio.
All right, thank you, Manolo and Elisa. And we have several reporters working on what happened this morning. We'll have a full report for you at 6 p.m. tonight. In the meantime, we invite you to KHON2.com. We will be constantly updating all aspects of this story online, again, at KHON2.com. And Mr. Miyagi, the administrator, one thing that he kept repeating is in case of an actual ballistic missile, get inside, and stay tuned. And with that, we will be back with much more here at 6 o'clock and online. Thank you for being with us. We send you now back to regular programming.
This has been a special report from the KHON2 News.